Season 2 of the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast, a place to learn more about homeopathy, deepening your knowledge, expanding your universe of possibility in the world of health and well-being through homeopathy.
Homeo what?
Homeo what?
Hi, folks.
Hello, hello.
It is a good morning, a good evening, and
It is afternoon for us.
a good afternoon
It is afternoon. There's no coffee.
to you.
There is no hot beverage right now.
I've got one.
You have a hot beverage?
Yep.
What do you have? Oh,
I
you
made
have
a cup of tea. Hence, my first
Oh, the slurp. Here we go.
gentle. It doesn't need to. You don't need to slurp when it's not piping hot. When it's super hot, you got to slurp just to add a little bit of cool to it.
That's fine. You do that.
Thank you.
Sorry, people.
The
Welcome to my
lawnmower
world.
has also stopped, which is
That's always good.
yep, going crazy outside the window there.
Mm-hmm.
And the good news that I have for you all is that we know what we're talking about today. The other great news is that I believe you've had quite a week.
Who, me?
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, you.
I guess that would be obvious that it's me. You're talking to me. But what...
Talking to me?
But in what context? What have I had quite a week about?
Are you not looking at the final draft of a certain thing?
That is really exciting.
Are you going to mention that?
I mentioned it the last 2 times.
Well, mention it again.
My book. It is designed. It is going through its final stages of proofing. It goes to the printer on Monday.
Hoo-ha.
I can't even, honestly, I can't believe it. And I think I saw, we've hit some big threshold in the number of listens to our podcast.
Oh, we did too, and we got this great question, and that's the one thing I'm not prepared for. Do you remember what the question was? It was a brilliant question that came from last week.
But I thought it was what we're talking about today, the question about Constitution.
No.
That was the whole purpose for today. We've got actually a couple of people, 3 or 4 people have suggested the topic of the Constitution.
The Constitution as opposed to...
As opposed to what?
Constitutional prescribing.
As opposed to the chronic remedy.
Good. All right, well, let's get into it then.
Why not?
All right, so is there a constitution?
Yes.
Like what? What is constitutional about me, for example?
Where do I begin? Can I begin with the definition of constitution in the glossary of Wenda O'Reilly's 6th edition of the Organon?
Pray proceed.
Pray proceed.
You
I didn't
may.
know you jump right in before I actually was at the page. Hold it. Hold
Wait
it.
1 second,
Wait
caller.
1 second, caller. Here we go. If I knew the alphabet, this would go a lot faster.
Okay.
All right. Constitution. From the German word Beschaffenheit.
Ja, Beschaffenheit.
Beschaffenheit.
Ja, das stimmt, ja.
Which means makeup. Constitution from the Latin constituere, to set up. The composition or makeup of a thing. The makeup of a person in body and or soul.
I love that. Can we just stop right there?
Please do.
The makeup.
The makeup.
Yeah, good. And
It
we're not
also-
talking about cosmetics, by the way, folks.
No. And it also is translated into quality or makeup. It could be translated as constitution, organization, or arrangement.
Yeah, an arrangement of those component parts
Yeah.
of you.
Of the person.
individual,
So when
of
you
the person.
see sometimes in a Materia Medica where it says this remedy is best suited for slender women with a masculine build, I think that means narrow hips.
I think it might. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or a lack
Brunette.
of feminine shape.
Or a brunette. You know, this remedy is best suited for blondes of Zoftig nature. The word Zoftig is not used, but I like to add that in.
Yeah.
Just as the opposite of the...
I think it was somewhat of a revelation to me to see that the word constitution has those Germanic roots, Latin and Germanic roots. I like the term makeup.
Pardon me.
And one of the surprises there was to see how that word has been adapted and morphed by prescribers. You okay there, Tiger?
I'm fine. I'm just...
Choking on your water.
You made me a seltzer water with your little machine. And it's really fizzy.
Yeah.
And I just aspirated a lemon seed.
You swallowed
Don't mind me.
You swallowed a fly. And how that word has been altered and significantly altered in much of the literature that we read.
Oh my gosh. And what it means today and the way people use the word today is oftentimes unrelated to what it's meant to mean.
How about we just solidify the fact that, a discussion about our makeup and the reality of that? Because for me, I have no problem with the concept of constitution, just as in Ayurvedic medicine.
Yeah. Right, are you
the doshas,
Pitta or a Vata?
Yeah, those let's translate those doshas as constitution for a minute.
Yeah.
And just in the same way that an Ayurvedic physician or practitioner would look at you, your makeup, and go, okay, based on these responses and your eye color and the way you look and the coffee you drink and the water that gets stuck in your throat, then you are, you lead with your Pitta and your Vata is blah blah and your Kapha is blah blah.
Yep.
So in other words, in medicine, in Chinese medicine, in Ayurvedic medicine, in medicine, in shamanic medicine, in homeopathic medicine, we have unchanging components or aspects of our makeup that determine, to an extent, a diagnosis or a constitutional type, and then that, of course, determines a treatment plan.
Right.
You're okay with all of that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are in that
that's
case.
Real.
That's real.
Yeah. Oh, keep going.
No, I was just going to go on about Ayurveda, but...
Well, you might as well.
No, I'm done.
You sure?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't want to step outside of my lane.
Right, I helped you out. You're welcome. There's a reference that I wanted to find. I couldn't find it. And it is something that I came across during my studies at Johns Hopkins. A book that I had to read about. It was a book on 19th century medicine.
Well, yes.
Do you remember I showed it to you?
Yeah.
And it had a chapter on how in the 19th century the concept of the Constitution became really important in Western medicine because it was associated with the beginnings of the insurance industry. And a person's so-called constitution, their makeup, would give the actuarial an analyst an idea of the likelihood of whether or not you were going to be a high-risk character.
And thus your premium.
And thus your premium would be determined. And so the idea of the Constitution picked up steam in 19th century American medical conversations because it was a part of the beginning of the conversation about risk factors in medicine, which makes total sense because it's around the same time that we're moving from a Hippocratic ideal into a post-Hippocratic, reductionistic paradigm that is focused on disease names.
Proof positive that the insurance salesmen have been embedded with medicine forever.
Forever. I mean, it's a really interesting idea, though, isn't it? If you're looking at, different body types. I mean, now we say, obesity carries certain comorbidities and, reduces risk.
Have you got any pre-existing conditions?
Exactly, but it's not, but they don't ask you, certain things about how tall you are. Oh, and in reality, there are some studies now that say BMI is actually not a predictor of health, right? Yeah. But those terms
or head size,
says the man with the abnormally small head. Did you see that picture that I posted of you on Instagram where your head looked really long?
My mother saw it.
What did she say your head looks long?
She did mention that particular post, but she also then said I can't find it, and then I looked and I couldn't find it.
Oh, because it's a story. It disappears.
So it goes away.
That's why when you said, that makes my head look weird, I was like, don't worry, it'll be gone in no time. Anywho, okay, you're welcome. So this idea of constitution is an interesting one, and I think if we situate it in 19th century medicine, it starts to make sense why Hahnemann doesn't talk about a constitutional remedy, but Kent does.
Very interesting. Yes.
Now, one of the things, of course, being...
Wait, sorry. Let me just hear that. Say that sentence again to me. I just want to make sure I heard correct.
Hahnemann doesn't talk about a constitutional remedy.
No, he talks about constitution, but he does not talk about a constitutional remedy.
So what I did was I took one of my PDFs of the Organon and I just went through and I just did a search on the word constitution, and the only way that it is used is exactly in relationship to the definition that I read earlier. In other words, acknowledging that different constitutional body types are, for example, necessary in a robust proving, so that you can understand how a remedy might react on someone who's, female body, male body, this body, that body, so you'd look at a gendered way, but you'd also look at the different body types.
Can we just go down a cul-de-sac quickly and then come back again?
I mean, if we didn't, it would be weird.
Well, because Paul Hersky, our mate in Boston, in his proving books, emphasizes that point very strongly, and Jeremy Sher does not at all. And so, it's really interesting. And I think I'm going to mention, am I going to say this? I think I'm right in saying that the harmonized proving guidelines for Liga and the ECH, usually you interrupt and...
I'm watching to see if you've learned now that if you're going to use an acronym, you need to tell the fine people.
I know that you're going to jump in.
I'm not. I'm waiting for you to
Liga,
define the terms.
The two organizations that also have a conference next week, by the way.
Yeah.
That organise medical homeopaths in Europe and globally don't emphasise this point about constitution and what you just said about provings needed to be tested on different constitutional types. Anyway, it's a cul-de-sac. We've come back out.
No, but I think it's really important. So because if we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about, which is how the term constitution is now used to talk about a person's soulmate remedy.
Yes.
Then we've got to understand that this is not a foundational concept within homeopathy, other than to say Hahnemann and subsequent authors use the term constitution exactly as it's meant to be, which is, the makeup of who you are.
Good. So how did it go wrong? What happened?
I'm not entirely sure, which... Go ahead, you have your hand raised. Yes.
Please,
sir.
Miss.
Yes, please, you may speak.
So it begins with Kent. I mean, he's really the first author that I've found. And I did do a big dive when I wrote Method.
Right.
He's the first person that said, come here, folks, come look out the window. Look at Miss Pulsatilla down there.
Yeah.
And look, there's Mr. Arsenicum with his top hat and his cane.
Right.
Right? And that's the first time in the teaching of Materia Medica that remedies become people. Up until that point, I'm going to assert it, fairly strongly. There might be a geek out there that is able to, identify something.
That's why I
further.
didn't say anything, because that's as far back as I can find. Is Kent.
And so that's, and I think it's a legit teaching technique to keep students awake, because let's face it, some of those Materia Medica lectures
dry
on the smaller polycrests, if you're focusing on symptoms alone, not so interesting.
So it's interesting. So Kent's lectures first published in 1900.
On philosophy?
On philosophy.
Yes. No, I thought it was a couple of years later. Is it 1900?
Main text originally published in 1990.
1990?
No, sorry, 1900.
1900,
yeah.
Okay, got it.
I think the Materia Medica was 1904.
And then the repertory came in chapters.
So as of 1900, the turn of the century, things start to change.
Now, he's teaching his postgraduate students in Philadelphia in 1890 for those 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's mainly a teaching clinic, but obviously amazing lectures as well.
Yeah.
And so all of those books, so the Materia Medica and the philosophy book, are published by his... from the transcriptions of his lectures by students, and then of course the repertory a lot of the work is mainly done by the students as well. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So that's the first time.
Yeah.
The first time that we start to hear about remedies as people, and I think then, of course, because of who's in the class, that generation of homeopaths educated by him. There's only something like 30 or 40 of them,
right?
But by goodness, they took homeopathy in tough times into different places. And it's interesting because when you start to read medical homeopathy textbooks written in that area, in that era, we're going to say right up to the probably 1960s, there is such emphasis upon the constitutional picture.
Yes.
Yeah, and the constitutional remedy. In case taking up until that time, up until Kant, everyone just shut up, aphorism 83, aphorism 84, and listened. But there's a growing emphasis after that time, based on, I think, some of those influences we've discussed, where you start to get questionnaires being used, where physicians with a pretty strict medical paradigm, set of blinkers, are taking homeopathic cases, and the emphasis starts to be on what is your response to cold weather, right? As a question, as in not it's brought up by the client, but it's a question that's on the list, so you ask the question. In what way are you affected by spiders? The fears become important. The direct questions about the generals that, direct and more closed questions start to appear in the case-taking aspects of what is going on in homeopathy. And then you start to read, even in Marjorie Blackie's book, that was published in the 1970s, but she was really busy in the 50s and 60s. So she's starting to talk about the constitutional remedy. Elizabeth Wright Hubbard, or Hubbard Wright? Wright Hubbard. My God, can I just tell you a story about her?
Sure.
Did you know that she did house calls all over Boston?
No.
Driving a Rolls Royce.
What? I did not know.
It's this amazing car.
Oh my gosh.
It is an old style Rolls Royce that you could, fold the top back, and she did her house calls and driving that thing. Oh my God. She died at work in front of a client.
Oh, wow.
She was a hard worker. President of the AIH.
Yeah.
Anywho, that's irrelevant. What's relevant is that and on this side of the Atlantic and on that side of the Atlantic, this idea of constitutional prescribing and a constitutional remedy became really, really important.
And it happens...
In medical circles.
Yeah, and it happens at the same time that the overarching emphasis on sort of the spirituality comes in.
Oh, okay.
Which is, well, I'm using the term spirituality because I'm anchoring it to Kant's Swedenborgian influence. So Kant, not only is he bringing this idea of the constitutional remedy, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but he's also emphasizing that a remedy that accesses that a homeopathic remedy has the potential to access the deepest part of the individual, which would be that of the will, which means that it can inherently, sort of influence how a person is, which then becomes the most central part, which then becomes an overemphasis on the mental and emotional presentation of the case, which then starts to leave behind the very particular aspects of the case. So, for example, I can remember being taught that if you've got a remedy that fits the mental and emotional picture, but the modalities don't match, like a hot, sweaty arsenic gum, well, it doesn't matter. You give the remedy that's going to fit this highest idea. And so what you're starting to see here is that Hahnemann did not include these things. No. And the movement. So Hahnemann was treating. So I should say it a different way. Let me start with what I usually do is homeopathy is a thing. Mm-hmm. Homeopathy is a thing, and Hahnemann, over the course of his lifetime, was able to articulate a very systematic way that these principles, in alignment with the laws of nature, should be applied, and the ways in which the making of the remedies takes place, and it's the combination of those two things together that can move a person to what we call capital C cure, right? The eradication of susceptibility. Throughout Hahnemann's time, what he was looking to do was to bring a person back. We talked about this, I think, in the last podcast or the one before. Restoration of health, right? So what you're doing is you're basically removing an overlay of disease. You're not treating the whole person, which is what started to become the conversation, Kant and post-Kantian. Good. Treat the whole person. Hahnemann is saying, no, you treat what I call the unintegrated parts. So the things that sit outside of the healthy state of the person.
The totality of characteristic symptoms of the diseased person.
Exactly, of the disease or the diseased person.
Yeah.
I prefer to say the disease because it leaves out the idea of the whole person, because I think it gets confusing. So anyway, so what you see is you've got this medicine established on universal laws that then gets changed up, right? Game of telephone over time, and then Kent, big hit, this Kent, and he really made a lot of changes happen in homeopathy that emphasized this whole person, which then results and the emphasis on the mental and emotional part. And then there are the remedy pictures.
Good.
Right? And then you've got this emphasis on the mental and emotional. And so it's just like bing, 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 and you end up in this place.
Well, those three things are fundamentally altered, not opposite or anything, but they're altered from the origins.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they're altered from the origins actually in a way that I think gave license for homeopathy to then go forward into far-reaching corners that are no longer but remotely tangential to the original principles.
So can I tell you about a guy, and I'm going to probably butcher the date because I'm totally not prepared for this, but I'm going to say 1870 or 1880. All right? And how I would know this is because he wrote a book, and then the plates for the book were destroyed in the Chicago fire.
Oh, wow.
Do you know when the big Chicago fire was?
No.
All right, well,
Excuse me, I just did it again.
we need a transcriber here that can look stuff up on the internet quickly for us.
We do. But
So-
you know what? I did remember the dates of the last Cricket World Cup.
Yeah, irrelevant.
And
But a big shout out to the New Zealand boys. Oh my God.
yeah, unlike what happened with
Smashed 'em,
England the
bro.
last time. Listen to me here with the
I know. Good on you, mate.
2019 July.
Anyway, it's not about the cricket.
Okay.
It's not about the World Cup.
It was July 2019, wasn't it?
It was. Yep. But von Gravelg.
Oh, yeah.
Von Gravelg.
Oh, see, I say his name totally differently.
How do you say his name?
I think I say something, well, because I don't really say it out loud much. So in my head, it's something like Van Gravel or...
Yeah. Yeah, well, that'll do.
Oh, but you're going to talk about his types, the constitutional types, like the hydrogenoid
Because that's constitutional
constitution.
prescribing.
Right.
So based on
Yeah.
an understanding of constitution,
Yeah.
this person is an oxygenoid
Yeah.
constitutional type.
And this one's a hydrogenoid.
Right. And oh, by the way, therefore, when I've got someone sitting in front of me, just like an Ayurvedic physician, I might have a look to see what the presenting complaints are, but I'm more interested in the person's makeup,
Yep.
and therefore I'm going to prescribe through you,
Right.
because it's a hydrogenoid case.
Of course.
All right? And so his early forays into constitutional prescribing were written in a book, and it's von Gravel's blah, blah, blah.
Gravel.
Yeah, it's, and apologies, folks, but I think he only wrote one book.
I think so too. And it's like, it's not much bigger than a pamphlet.
No.
And isn't it called Von Gravel's Constitutional Types or something?
Yeah.
If you've got software, I think it's probably on Radar.
Anywho.
Yeah.
And so this is actually constitutional prescribing,
Sure.
or as it was described back in the day.
Yeah. And then there's the other type of constitutional prescribing, which is the idea of prescribing on sort of the non-chronic presentation, like prescribing for the healthy person.
Have you had any experience or good experiences doing that? Mm-hmm. Tell me.
Yeah.
Any stories?
I'm going to cough again.
While you're coughing. Okay.
Right, it was just one cough. This seltzer water, very fuzzy. He's removing it from me. I have. Actually, I don't want to talk about it just yet because I want to work through something that we're talking about, because I think that because I almost wish we had started this going backwards and forwards by talking about what people think it is now.
We are going backwards and forwards. It's
Well-
how we work.
No, not back and forth.
Well, let's talk about what
But
people
let's-
think it is today.
Exactly, and then we could fill in some
Are
of the
you a
gaps.
classical homeopath?
They say with weird sneer on their face and a turned up nose. Yeah, somehow this term classical has become a dirty word. Let's just leave that behind, people. How about people who are just practicing homeopathy and are trying to adhere to the universal laws way that Hahnemann was able to interpret for us?
All right.
I like that.
So, can you please give me my constitutional remedy?
Yeah, or my favorite from Facebook, when people are getting frustrated with the person who's prescribing for them and ask the question of the group and says, how long should it take a homeopath to find your constitutional?
Yeah, that end was, yes, constitutional.
Your constitutional. Are you on a constitutional? Mm-hmm. What's your constitutional? And it's wrapped up in the simillimum idea that there is one remedy, the unicorn remedy.
The unicorn remedy.
That's what I call it, the unicorn remedy. It's the one that makes you levitate and lose all your cellulite. And you always find a parking place. And your partner always does the dishes. And your kids are nice. And your dog doesn't get fleas. You know, there's this idea that that homeopaths have this magic power, or if they do all the seminars and they study with, you know, the hip in crowd and their social media influencers, that they're going to be able to find that one remedy.
I think that's an excuse because you clearly don't know how to do that.
That's what I've been told.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding.
Oh, my God.
No, I've had it happen to me twice.
You're kidding.
No.
Wow.
Oh, people say stuff. Yeah. Once was just a homeopath talking trash and said that, yeah, that's kind of funny. Anyway, I don't even want to go there. And the other, there was a client who was disappointed that I had not found their constitutional. This client who came with a spreadsheet of like the 700 remedies she had taken before, and had a really complex diagnosis and really expected that there would be one magic pill that would change her entire way in the world. You know, we talked about this a little bit before, or maybe we didn't talk about it on the podcast. This might have been with teaching. No. How many classes did you teach this week?
7.
I think I did too. No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I taught 6.
And I did clinic.
And then clinic. Right. So a lot. So I don't remember who I said what to, but there was, there is this way in which when, here's how I think I can say it. There is a level of expectation that clients can have because the ecosystem, talking about homeopathy, there are a lot of different people sort of find their camp that they like to be in, right? So they're the simillimum people who think you're going to find like, you know, the lesser spotted, you know, 3-toed aardvark from, you know, whatever, that feather is going to be what, you know, makes you levitate. Then there are other people who think, no, you just give 25 remedies a day and that's what's going to solve it.
Those are two very different approaches.
They're really different approaches.
Hopefully we have a middle path.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so. But the conversation I was having, this was with, I know, I remember where I was having it. Anyway, we were talking about a client with an expectation of getting a remedy that was going to really change their life. And this person had a pretty tragic life story that included a period of time where they were, let's say, like a 5-year period of time during which all sorts of really terrible things happened, leaving them unable to develop the skill sets that they would have developed at a particular point in their life. Mm-hmm. There is this idea that one would get a remedy that would help a person move past that. But they're like all the skills and all of the learning and all of the life that has to happen. You can't just get a pill that moves you through life that was missed. Yeah? Another example is I had a client who was looking for homeopathy to help them find a job. Not because they were, you know, suffering with ADHD and therefore couldn't focus and be accountable for their work. But they had heard that there's a type of homeopathy where they match you with a particular pattern from a particular animal, and it helps you to, you know, get a better job.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I didn't either. It's quite, you know, it's quite profound. And I think some of it comes from this idea of this simillimum. Do you know what I'm saying? Or did I just take a cul-de-sac that made no sense whatsoever?
No, I'm completely with you. I mean, I'm just reflecting on the times. I have in my practice, one woman said to me, having taken a remedy which I gave her, "You have given me my soulmate." Which is quite a remedy response.
It totally is.
Yes. And so I am thinking of another client where it did not matter what she had, and it did not matter if it was acute or chronic or this year or that year. Lachesis cured everything for her. Yeah. Everything.
I have a couple of similar clients in my practice.
And I got another client that I can think of where it didn't matter what they had, acute, chronic, or whatever, it doesn't matter what year, phosphorus fixed everything. Right? Those are the only 3 examples I've got. I'm going to say 25,000 consultations over 35 years. I can think of those examples, you know? And so I'm bewildered when I hear about the questions about the soulmate and the expectation of the remedy fixing every aspect of this car wreck.
Well, especially because when we look at the totality of symptoms, right? The totality of symptoms shifts when a person is in their chronic state or is having an acute, right? And therefore, technically a different remedy should be indicated, and usually a complementary remedy.
So, you know, this idea is emphasized in Kent's book, you know, Homeopathic Philosophy. I'm amazed that it's not emphasized at all in his casework.
Not at all, I know.
When you look at his cases...
they're like just straight up
is
cases.
this the same guy?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, again, he was clearly a charismatic and entertaining teacher.
Well, with that mustache.
Stop
it. Love that mustache.
You could keep a whole pie in that mustache, or the remnants of it.
You could keep a whole family in that mustache.
Second lunch.
Yeah.
But, you know, the cases that we see coming down the line from his case books...
they're like regular...
Ibramatium here and, you know, and... Yeah. And Lycopodium there and Berberis there. And so, you know, it's... There seems to be a disconnect. Vithoulkas also emphasizes the simillimum nature. And if I'm feeling charitable, sometimes I go, I see that as an aspirational goal. In the same way that when I'm going outside and I'm shooting arrows, and if, you know, the good thing about shooting archery is that, especially when you're not in competition, is that it doesn't matter, right? But as soon as if you're starting to shoot for a something, then suddenly your mind comes into play. So just shooting arrows is kind of cool as almost a check to see where you're at and how centered you are. But like you, I suppose, with pottery.
Pottery, same thing, yeah.
But for me, I aspire to hit the middle of the target. That's where I'm looking. I mean, the pin that I'm looking through is always on the middle of the target. Now, whether it goes there or not is dependent on me. But, so that's an aspiration. And I know that sometimes in my homeopathy, to take the analogy a bit further, then it doesn't matter how much I'm holding my pin on the gold. It heads off into the blue. You know, I shoot an arrow and it's not that close to the center.
Well,
but I'm still aspiring to it.
Yeah.
I'm always aspiring to it.
Yeah, but I think I would say it a different way, because I think that when we are treating most people in this day and age, we are addressing their chronic issue. And I'm using the term chronic in Hahnemann's language, yeah? So we are looking at the totality of symptoms that addresses their chronic disease. And as you work through that, it unfolds. We've talked about this a bit before on the podcast. And that totality can expand and contract as we're working toward getting closer to the healthy state of the individual. And it's a multi-dimensional perspective, because once you take into account, and sorry, I'm getting in the weeds now a little bit for more advanced folks, but once you take into account sort of the ways that the underlying miasmatic issues are kind of presenting or are dormant, right? Sometimes what happens is you give a remedy and then you just take enough strain off of the vital force that miasmatic eruption just settles down and the person gets more vitality and they feel better. And so then you might be giving a completely different remedy. And sometimes we call that like an acute exacerbation of the chronic. But I think of it as sort of the tumultuous nature of the ways in which chronic disease presents itself. And I think this is really important in working with complex autoimmunity. Right?
That's interesting.
Because it's, as we say a lot, it's all about case management with homeopathy. Now, are there cases where you get one remedy and it lasts for, it's the only remedy a person needs? Absolutely. And I have some cases like that are, it's a bang on, but it's a bang on for the totality of their chronic picture, and they're just slow to get through it. I'm thinking of, that, do you remember, it's a case of phosphoric acid lady. It was one of the earliest, it was the hardest case I took when I was early in practice. And this woman had so many issues, and the remedy phosphoric acid got her through for so long. And then she disappeared. In fact, I think she was one of the cases that I submitted for my certification exam. So it's that long ago.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then I heard from her. I hadn't heard from her for years. And she reached out to me when we were working in Brooklyn. I just remember where I took the call. So that would have been like 2015.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many years later, right? And she reaches out to me and she needed the same remedy.
Yeah. It's interesting.
And I said, well, how have you been? She's like, I was good. I'm sure she had other things happen in her life, but that chronic picture was still there. She got the remedy. Do I think that phosphoric acid is her sumillimum or her constitutional remedy? Absolutely not. I think she's still working through a particular facet of the disease process, and it's a good enough prescription that she gets relief and she goes on in relative health.
So you're saying that we could grab the word constitutional and just put in the word chronic?
Yes.
Good.
That's what I mean. That's what I try to get the students to say.
Our modern misinterpretation of
exactly.
Yeah.
So if somebody is going to say, "Did your practitioner find your constitutional?" I'm not even sure exactly what that means, but has your practitioner found a good remedy for you, for your kind of bigger picture stuff?
Yeah.
Is really nice.
Isn't it interesting? I think we've kind of come to a conclusion as to how it happened, but I don't think Hahnemann could have been any clearer. The unraveling of chronic disease involves aphorism 171.
171. Yeah.
Multiple remedies, anti-psoric remedies in succession over a period of time.
You're
going to read us 171?
Of course I am. I don't come to these recordings without my Organon. Aphorism 171.
Just so you notice, folks, she's just pulled up a sleeve and she's reading from the tattoo on her left arm.
Yeah, in chronic diseases that are not venereal, therefore those most usually arising from psora, and this is where he's making a comparison between syphilis, psychosis, and psora, one often needs to employ several anti-psoric remedies in succession to bring about a cure, each to be homeopathically selected in accordance with the result of an examination of the group of symptoms that remain after the previous means has completed its action.
So multiple remedies
are required
in succession over a period of time and multiple consultations. So how did that become, you've got one shot? You've got one, it's 1977.
Yeah.
You know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's 1977 and Luke Skywalker
is
listening to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he says, turn off the automatic thing, and he's not an aeroplane, what's he flying? Spacecraft.
Yeah. And
use the Force, Luke. And you got one shot. He's only got one shot to blow up the Death Star. And he's got a Messerschmitt up his ass. Sorry, that's an Australian expression.
I'm like, wait.
He's got Darth Vader chasing him and shooting at him. So, Daddy, know.
Yeah. Of course.
Sorry, that's a cricketing expression. I want to go there actually.
Oh boy, yeah.
So there's an amazing cricketer called Keith Miller, Australian cricketer in the 50s mainly, late 40s and 50s. but he was a dynamic and swashbuckling cavalier cricketer. And also, he was quite popular with the ladies. And he... and the war, Second World War came along, and anyone of a certain age, off they go.
Yep.
And he was asked about pressure playing international cricket, and he said, pressure is having a Messerschmitt up your ass, on your tail. That's what he said. In other words, that is, let's be realistic about.
What is this word you say? Messerschmitt? What is it?
It's a German plane. It's a German fighter jet, propeller.
Okay.
Aeroplane.
Okay.
That's pressure, when you've got Darth Vader on your tail.
I have no idea where you're going with this. Are you connecting this to the simillimum idea?
Yeah, totally.
Wow.
Because now it's 1977 and we're heading into the thing.
Right.
And he's got to shoot the laser.
Oh my God.
At the right minute. Boom. It's simillimum homeopathy.
Right.
It's exactly the same as that. Now you can, if you're in tune with the Force, Luke, then maybe that's the style of homeopathy that's going to work for you. But
my gosh,
no, it's too much pressure. That's pressure.
It's pressure. It's also not real, and then you spend all this money going to watch all the gurus perform their stand on one finger thing. But it's like solving cases like that becomes like, I call them English lit major analyses, where you have to get all your threads to tie together, and there's a denouement, and you've got a character study, and and then you've got this resolution. Whereas, really solving a case in homeopathy is it's aphorism 3. You need to understand what needs to be cured in the patient, what is curative in medicines, and how to apply it according to principles and remove the obstacles. I mean, that's basically the job description of the homeopath, always was and always will be, right? But this idea of people create these themes and I don't know, it's perplexing because it's not that difficult. It's hard, right? You have to study, you have to learn how to do it. Most important thing is to understand the philosophy in case management, long-term case management. I'm going to get on your nerves by saying it. The idea of if you graduate from homeopathy school and you can't make no, it makes you crazy. If you can't make the first prescription, then you should get your money back and a pony. I know you hate what I say.
You know what you just said about a Messerschmitt? I have no reference point for what you just said there.
I know, you don't understand the part about the pony.
Anyway, you've said it a number of times, and I understand. And you're totally right.
But
can we just reiterate what we're saying here? Because I think it's really important.
Yeah.
Because I think the message, you might have heard it 100,000 times now if you've been listening to us, but our job is not to focus on this golden bullet, this magic pill. It is to unravel chronic disease through multiple consultations and over a period of time with multiple antipsychotic remedies. And so one is very different from the other. And I have to tell you, the way that it feels, I'm going to make a feeling statement.
Oh, look at you. And you're clutching your chest.
I'm holding my heart.
Yeah, you are, aren't you?
And it's because I used to be so anxious at work, right? I would go to work and my professional posture was to feel anxious that I wasn't getting close enough, or I had to really, 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 turn myself into a Philadelphia pretzel by getting it right. And that's very anxiety provoking.
Well, because it's not, but it's also not realistic because there isn't a right. I mean, sometimes you nail it right through, like you said. Good. Sometimes we find a remedy and everything sails. And I also don't want to minimize the importance of working hard to get to make the best choice.
Absolutely.
But you know what I thought of while you were clutching your chest and about to sing feeling songs was
feeling songs.
This is I think you hit something really important, which is how we went from sort of everybody sort of in a panic with the simillimum mythology. We have to find this one remedy. Yeah. Right. To giving 25 million remedies because the classical people don't know how to make a change in a person's health. And I think the middle path...
The middle path for our students and for, our graduate, you look in the eyes of our students in supervision, and there's a sense of competence, and there's a growing sense of competence and confidence in being able to, what's the totality of characteristic symptoms of the diseased person right now? That's my job. Okay, what is it? It's going to be Hepasoft. Boom.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, it's like, they used to say, put 50 homeopaths in a room, you get 50 different remedy recommendations. It shouldn't be that way.
No,
it should be
I agree.
Maybe 50 homeopaths, 3 or 4 possibilities. Because because sometimes you have to make a call on the totality. So I'll give an example. There's a case example that I've used a few times in clinic where we had a case in the last year or so. And there was a remedy that seemed completely evident. And it just, like, from every angle, should have been good. And it was good, but it wasn't great. And we gave it a good run, and it was good. It was good. Mm-hmm. And then we said, well, I think we should look at it from a different perspective. It's just shifting the perspective. And we moved from this sort of largest totality idea to a remedy that was more focused on the female hormonal system. And boom, everything shifted in the case. That idea isn't like just starting all over again, but it's acknowledging that the totality of symptoms, there are a few different perspectives. There aren't a million, right? There aren't 50. There may be 2 or 3 ways that you can look at a case. Right? You might say, this is a case where I'm going to really, where the weight of the simple language, in other words, the way in which the uncompensated story that comes out of the person's mouth tells a subtext story to the way that they are giving their symptoms.
Nice.
Right? And so sometimes we focus on that. Sometimes we say there's a story there, but what we really have is a case that should be dealt with through the physical generals. In other words, it's a good repertory case. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a contracted totality because we recognize that a person is in ill health and therefore doesn't have available to them the energy that it would take to go and treat the deepest level of chronic disease. And the most appropriate thing to do is to start with, maybe it's an organ that's compromised, or maybe it's a smaller totality aspect that needs to be dealt with, so that the person has enough energy perhaps to deal with something in a more chronic way.
Yeah.
And sometimes the homeopath recognizes that a case is at a point where palliation is most appropriate. And so giving those smaller totality remedies is the way to go.
So, I reckon that kind of sums it up because, I mentioned Marjorie Blackie before.
With the Rolls Royce.
No, that was Elizabeth
that was
Hubbard,
Elizabeth Hubbard. Right, Hubbard. Right, yeah.
So, no, Marjorie Blackie was a homeopathic queen.
Yeah.
And she wrote that the constitutional remedy is that, I can't remember the first part of the sentence right now, the sum total of all of the parts of the person, and, comma, which I don't necessarily agree with, but she said, is to be thought of in the completely healthy patient,
right,
who's got some symptoms.
Yes.
In other words, and I'm paraphrasing that just for clarity, in other words, perhaps there is such a thing as a constitutional prescription.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so you would ask me for an example
for a really healthy person.
Yeah, or how do we prescribe for babies? This is why I love Borland's types, for example. I mean, how many times do we prescribe carb to the little Buddha babies with a little bit of eczema and some farts?
And a little bit of smelly smells. Yeah.
Exactly. Sweaty on the head and back of the neck. So
I love it.
Right? That's a constitutional prescription. Now, in the last podcast, the last one I listened to, I think we've got one more in the can before that, but I was talking about a kid that I had worked with, and the kid had gotten various prescriptions, and then there was the point at which the chronic state was evident. Mm-hmm. Pieces came together, right? So it's so much about terminology. It's case management.
Well, it is, but it's also the point that I want to make about health is that I don't think that there's too much disagreement about what you said about the carb baby or the sulfur baby.
No.
But with Western adults, show me a healthy Western adult that's not straight up toxic. That's
Right.
not, and the only places where I think where you would find a different opinion could be, the person that's 110 living on a Greek island, like Alanossos, for whom they are extraordinarily healthy, and they've eaten the Mediterranean diet for 110 years,
Right.
and then possibly you are looking at a healthy person that's a little bit off.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
And so, perhaps there is a degree or a level of a lack of health which makes the mythical constitutional prescription just less relevant.
I totally agree with that. But I keep thinking about, well, how did Kent get from point A to point B?
Well, when Kent was alive, here's another thought, every piece of food on the planet was organic.
Well, no, but it's not that.
You don't think it's that?
No, I'm talking about it from a completely different perspective, which is he changed
The emphasis.
the emphasis.
Got it, yeah.
Right? Which I think, I'm really glad we had this conversation today, although I feel like I want to just do it all again because I have now 100 more thoughts.
Well,
But-
I've got one most important one.
Okay, wait, just let me finish on the Kent thought real quick, which is I've always said, so much of it is the emphasis on the will and the mental and emotional, and it's the Swedenborgian and da-da-da.
Well, that's the influence, yeah.
Well, it is, but I never really thought about the fact that Kent, as the first author, I was never sure, and you said it with such authority today that I trust you.
Thank you, darling.
Yeah, you're welcome. But I would want to do a deeper dive into the journals to see if this term constitution just came up in conversations that weren't, the major published authors. I did look at a few to see how it carried through, and I looked through Roberts, and sure enough, he's just echoing Kent pretty clearly. But going back to it, the shifts in homeopathy, it's not just a shift toward the emphasis on the mental and emotional, but also it takes this idea of the shift in the language around constitution, the constitutional remedy, actually is what seals the deal. That is the shift that went forward that has, I think, altered homeopathy practice almost irrevocably. Like, how do you put that genie back in the bottle?
Well, you could read David Little, for example.
Yeah.
And David Little writes beautifully about constitution. And he also then talks about a very accurate and limited version of constitutional prescribing. That's not what we've just discussed today.
Von Gravel. No, but I'm talking on a more meta way.
Right.
Like, I know how you can do it is we do it when we teach, right? And we're doing it as we're talking about it today. But it's like entrenched in the culture with homeopathy. Do you know what I mean? And so this idea of how people prescribe, I think it's a tough one, and especially if you're really entrenched in how you've been taught to do it.
Oh, completely. Your primary teachers, if you're a medical homeopath, or if you're a professional homeopath, or if you're a professional homeopath in this place and not that place, you will be fundamentally influenced by your early teachers. And that's why it amazes me that the topic that we've talked about today of constitutional prescribing is still alive in some parts of the homeopathic world and totally dead in others. It's not even mentioned in some parts of our world.
Right, because unless you got on the Kentian train, but that just shows how deeply embedded post-Kentian homeopathy is in. I mean, look at the way that the certification exam is
Oh, good point.
It's built around Kentian homeopathy.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, I'm going to say what I know about it. Yeah.
I mean, it's both. There's, obviously there's going to be Hahnemannian stuff, but it is, it's taking into account so much of, the Kentian influence. This is why when I say Kent, he's problematic.
Well, he is. Let's leave him for another day.
Yeah, but it's the downstream effect. Anyway, I hope this gets people thinking about how this idea of the constitutional prescription and the way that it's used now is just a manifestation of...
What should be the term chronic prescribing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except that it's, thrown in the Kentian way.
Yeah.
What we didn't talk about, and I don't think we have time to talk about, though, is how you were talking about Vitulcus and how the Vitulcian essences influenced this way in which Materia Medica, subsequent to, his time, becomes is giving more emphasis to the picture, the remedy picture.
I could talk about it for 2 minutes, or I could talk about it for an hour.
Let's save it.
All right. Cool.
That's it. It's Friday afternoon, and I've got clinic tonight.
You've got a big afternoon.
Yeah, teaching tonight and tomorrow.
All right.
Yay. So technically this is like Wednesday for me, because I still have 2 more days of work.
All right.
All right.
Hey, nice one. Talk soon.
See ya. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Academy of Homeopathy Education offers clinical training that far exceeds the requirements put forth by the Council of Homeopathic Certification and ACHINA. Unlike other programs that give credit for paper or pre-recorded video cases, AHE has built a thriving telehealth clinic with clients of all ages and from all walks of life to give a diverse clinical experience that addresses the most prevalent 21st century health challenges. Standalone clinical training packages are available for qualified practitioners. Learn more at ahe.online.